seabed is 20,000 watt. Then taken a real knock because of this one incident. You may notice uh, those are well-known examples. Small problems from Harry. Now, coming to what damage they do to the pile foundation. So I'm going to slowly draw you back into where we should be going. So you must have all seen pictures like this. This is a famous Coachella earthquake. Simply gave way, the whole thing sank and rotated like that. Bad failures. Many examples exist of structure. Okay, they're not big structures. You have some staircases, stairs upside down, and will make a staircase going upside down, right? It makes no sense. What happened was there used to be another building just like this next to it, which completely went down, and these were belonging to that other building. That's why they simply turned upside down like that. This is called Mansi Building Complex. But if you think about it, at best estimate, our city, 300 kilometers, buildings which collapsed, and countless others which showed, like I was in the results later on in this workshop as well. In the middle of the afternoon, we all felt a little dizzy. And I thought it may be my jet lag catching up or something. And the Californians thought the same. And then the Japanese then made some telephone calls and said, oh, that was a 5.8 earthquake. It just happened. And we continued. The guy, and yet, okay, it's slightly bigger than 5.8, this one, but it caused such damage in a city so far away. That's really, that's why we need a lot of good geotechnical and earthquake engineers to make sure these kind of things will happen. I can show these pictures until cows come home. Buildings mostly collapsing because people are greedy and want open shop space at the base. So they remove one column to give more display space. And of course, when the earthquake comes, there's not enough shear capacity, and the things just keel over, as you would expect. And that's what this is a place. These days with smartphones, this is a Mexico earthquake, and with the smartphones, we are now getting. We can see hopefully happening. So we'll get more evidence on what. Let's also start to introduce a few basic things. I'm sure a lot of you know already what soil liquefaction is, but I'd like to just clarify so that we're all on the same page. The best way to look at this is going back to soil mechanics 101.1, if you like. So imagine you are doing a shear box test. So you pack your sand, and I'm going to shear the top half. You may or may not have plotted this properly, but if you plot the shear stress on the red plane with the shear strain, two of these things are possible. If you pack your grains quite tight, and therefore at very high density, you you should get a peak strength on tau, and then it should strain soften to get to the critical state, which is the red dot at the end, at large strengths. If you pack your grains quite loose, you do the same experiment and you shear the soil, you'll follow the light green line to get to the critical state, you will never see a peak. Everybody understands that, right? What's interesting is, while you're doing this, instead of just worrying about the stress, if I look at the volumetric strain with the shear strain, then the dense sand should first contract a bit and then it will dilate strongly. Anybody not sure about this? Yeah, they're all experts. It's like a very good starting point. Has to go up. So the only complication with earthquake engineering is that the rate of loading is quite fast. If you do a slow shear box test, no problem. It will just adjust to its new volume you carry on your very well. Exactly the same results, by the way, can be obtained with traction tests as well. Quite fast. When I say fast, it's medium fast. Earthquakes are not that quick. They're only between 1 to 5 hertz. So it's like moving something once a second or maybe 5 times a second. Not much faster than that. However, because the hydraulic conductivity or permeability of our soils is of the order of 10 to the power of -2, -3 if it is sand, meters per second. If I'm applying 5 cycles in 1 second, I cannot move the water away because the water can only flow at 10 to the power of -2 meters a second. So that's too slow, right? So the water can't flow, which means that instead of having a volume change, you will have a pressure change. So all my tendency to have a volume change is translated to excess pore pressure. If I have loose sand, or maybe suction pressures or negative pressures if I have dense sand. So broadly, that is the story. So you can make fun cartoons like that. Now we understand that the water pressure goes up in case of loose sand. If I shake it, then this component here, U, goes up, which means my effective stress has to come down. So if this goes up, that has to come down. And if the effective stress comes down, our soil mechanics tells us that the world will come to an end, basically. That's what Terazagi's principle is. So you increase the water pressure, the grains start losing contact, and if they lose the contact completely, you call it full liquefaction. In other words, your soil has turned into liquid, and therefore things will sink in. That's basically liquefaction can be explained so easily. And I can speed up later on. So if I'm plotting the water pressure with time, I'm only excess water pressure. The hydrostatic water pressure is always there. So I'm only looking at excess pore water pressure. And if initially, before the earthquake really kicked in, if I'm plotting my tau versus gamma, the shear stress versus shear strain, my stiffness of the soil is going to be quite high because soil is not a bad material. It has good stiffness. That's why we build foundations on it. Okay, so keep slow and your initial stiffness is high. Now, if I allow more time, more cycles of earthquake come, and my water pressure is built up, which means if I now plot the loop, it's kind of starting to flatten out. So the slope, your secant stiffness or tangent stiffness, whatever you want to take, now shows that it has to come down. Let's work with secant stiffness for now. It's easy for us to see. If I continue the earthquake, now I'm completely close to being fully liquefied, and my stress strain loop is lying on its side. So if I try to make secant modulus of that, secant stiffness, you're going to get 0. So what's important for us is that not that the soil has liquefied or not, it's the fact that the stiffness is going from really good material to almost not having any stiffness or turning into liquid. All that makes sense, yeah? So how does it look in reality? This is the year I was born. In fact, the earthquake happened before I was born, 64. Sorry to tell you my age. But when the Niigata earthquake happened, the Japanese are a bit strange people, you will find. The earthquake happened, this is the airport, as you will see shortly. Instead of running away, this Japanese chap decided to take his 8mm camera out. It's not like your smartphone in those days. You have to get the camera out, set it all up, and get going. And he did all that and recorded this. So that's the airplane. People are running out, and this guy is still continuing to film while the building is settling and all the water is pumping out. So this is real footage from 1964. That's amazing, isn't it? How many of you, being good engineers, will stay close to a building and record while the thing is coming down on you? Japanese for their commitment. They also make very good structural engineers. These are the rock buildings which many of you may have seen before. Fantastically, not a single crack on them. By the way, there's an equivalent one in China recently I've seen, where they tried to make an excavation next to a pile building, and the building completely laid on its side. Not a single crack in the concrete. Perfect structural engineering. And fairly lousy geotechnical engineering, you can say. So all of them basically have suffered rotations quite badly. Another telltale sign is these sand boils, which confirm liquefaction has occurred. Because you're losing all your total stress is being matched by the excess pore pressure. You tend to get these whenever full liquefaction happens. If you walk to a site after the earthquake, you will inevitably find these sand boils. These are my own pictures from the Taiwan earthquake in 1999. But we can jump from between one earthquake to another now, because we've got enough data to look at these things. This is from Haiti earthquake, Port-au-Prince, and you can see these are high-resolution pictometric images in those days, and that is the crane structure, which is same as this. And this we got even before we went to the site. So the resolution of the image is so good that you can happen or not. Here you can see some lateral spreading happening. The cracks there, they look kind of insignificant. When I showed up and I got in, this is the same crack as what I'm seeing there. So physically, they're about this deep. But the fact that you can use rapid, one of my research areas is to look at satellite images to identify damage before you can actually go. And it's very important for agencies like World Bank, because if they know how much of the building stock is damaged, then they can release the funds more quickly and so on. So there's a lot of other activity related to this. But that's liquefaction. Christchurch, three different, a short building with shallow foundations, has suffered a rotation and settlement. You can see this is near the Avon River. Our own Harbour Masters building, and this one is supported on pile foundations. This is on shallow foundations. But for a structural engineer, both did exactly the same thing. Both suffered less. So if you go to the top, where most of the equipment is there for a harbour master, it is down. So it is useless. Hope they fix it. But this consequence of liquefaction, which is lateral spreading business. So lateral spreading is when you have slightly sloping ground. In fact, our research shows us that even if I make my slope at an angle of no more than 3 to 5 degrees, which is very gentle slope, you cannot pick a slope of 3 degrees by naked eye. You need surveying instruments. Okay. such you can have quite a lot of horizontal movement of ground if the stuff below liquefies. So this is the embankment, which is you can just about see, and the embankment is stopping the water to come into Christchurch. So after the earthquake, this whole ground wanted to go walking that way. And if an embankment wants to move down the slope, you'll always get tension cracks on the surface. And that's what you're seeing here along. These are much deeper cracks. I didn't dare jump into them, lest I may not come out again. So I didn't go into that like what I did in Haiti. These are much deeper. My student, I sent to Ecuador earthquake, using earthquake, a girl called Fiona Hughes, and she came back with images like this, which is exactly look the same as these ones. Again, the same underlying soil mechanics is happening again and again. You can find the same thing in Bhuj earthquake as well. These are from SK Jain, I believe. Sudhir Kumar Jain, yeah, SK Jain. At that time at IIT Kanpur. Not only that, finally we come to pile foundation. Piles also seem to behave the same way across many different earthquakes. And this is why it is a science. If it is repeatable, then that is causing the failure, the mechanism as we call it, which means we can design, if you understand the failure mechanism, you can design to stop that from happening. Now, this is a small wharf in Haiti, and you can see as the ground wanted to go this way, it made the piles, it wanted to take the piles with it. The deck is still plastic hinges forming. You can see the concrete wall. Much lighter structure. This is from my student, as I said, is this one. In fact, this earthquake happened in 2010. This earthquake happened in 2016. Our book actually came out in 2009. So we did some centrifuge tests, observed these type of failures, and did the test. And there's a bit in the book which tells you how to work out the loads and so on. But isn't it fantastic that after the book came out, these things happen, and their structures seems to know soil mechanics. They follow exactly what was written in the book and fail properly. That is the most gratifying thing you can ever say in your career. A little bit about the most recent earthquake, the Indonesian earthquake, mostly from a lateral spreading point of view. I've been in this business for more than 25, 30 years now, but this earthquake is the first time where we started getting satellite images at quick succession, which can make it look like a video. I'll show that to you in a minute. But as you may know, if you're in India, it's not too far from here. This Indonesian earthquake, now it's called Palu earthquake, happened in 2018, last year. And there are lots and lots of people, Japanese groups, British groups, everybody went and looked at different types of failures, damage, distribution, all kinds of things. But I'm going to focus on just the liquefaction. And I'm going to even be narrower than that. I'm going to focus only on lateral spread. What happened in this earthquake was there's a lot of liquefaction, but there was also a tsunami, which, like the Sendai earthquake, I'm going to show you the bit. So here is one area close to Palu, and you can see there's no loading on this thing. It's just a road, and you can see this horizontal cracks across the road where the ground wanted to go past it. Okay, and if you put buildings, the ground will take them pressure of ground properly. The passive pressure created by soil is almost an unstoppable force. If you put any man-made structure in its way, it will mobilize more and more pressure until the structure gives up. So we need to understand that properly. even big, tall structures, which are dynamically quite good. But those are just watertight. Typically, they perform really, really well under dynamic loads because they're very low frequency structures. But if the ground is going to go, nobody is going to help that. So this is why you got all these towers that have followed. This starts to give you a view of how widespread the damage is from aerial footage. This is the one I want to show you. Somebody has put together a satellite image, obviously from space. Okay, I hope. Can you see it? So just for effect, I'll show again. Lateral spreading, yeah. So, welcome to earthquake engineering. What you're dealing with is that ground turns to liquid. That's what it is. Even on 3-degree, 5-degree slopes, you have massive amount of lateral spreading, and all the little dots, which are so inconspicuous from space, are somebody's form. And that's what we were seeing in the earlier pictures. But once you go up so far, now you see why it is flowing like a river. It's almost like a river, isn't it? It's amazing. Just for contrast, in case the video does not play, I always must have a backup. Here's a picture before the earthquake, and here's a picture after the earthquake. But you can see how one transforms to the other dramatically during the earthquake, a few seconds after. We can learn quite a lot from past earthquakes. Here is an example of something we identified completely as a new thing following the Christchurch earthquake. What we observed there with my student Jenny Heskel was that they had these bridges across the river, which is, it's an insult to the word river to call it a river. River Haven is about maybe this wide. It's hardly, it's like a canal, but even by New Zealand standards, it's a tiny little thing. And they have these small bridges, 2-3 span bridges crossing their locations. Some had simple abutments, and some had a bit more extensive ones. Here is a bridge called they call it ANZ bridge, Australia New Zealand funded bridge or something, which is on steel edge piles going vertically down. The other ones were just on just shallow foundations on strip footings. One thing we noticed was that all of them failed by forming these plastic hinges just underneath them. Yeah. This is from the Musini earthquake, this is from Christchurch earthquake. So what we have proposed based on this, and this is a paper in geotechnique if you want to look it up, is if I have a structure which has real high axial stiffness, the decks are very strong axially, and therefore the bridge at the deck level can't compress. But what we are asking the ground, what the ground is asking the structure to do is, well, I'm going to go towards the river. If you want to come with me, the ground here is moving this way. Okay, so we can idealize that as saying the ground wanting towards the river in this picture. But our problem is for going inwards for a ride on the top. Most of these bridges have really high axial stiffness because they are integral bridges. And compress they can do is to rotate. So they have to go with the soil and therefore rotate like that. If the structure wants to rotate that way, you will get a plastic hinge there. Now, having shown you the pictures and explained the mechanism, you design to stop that from happening. Or at least you know where the weakness in the structure is. It is at the pile head. And that's the beauty of learning either from experimentally observed field cases like this, is that you can get this how things can fail. You can then go to stop that from happening. We're all good engineers. If we know what the problem is, we can fix it. But if you don't know what the problem is, you're shooting arrows in the dark and anything can happen. Similarly, we looked at stuff which can float up. Again, this is a very new problem. The problem is being observed more often now, but it existed before, where you have underground structures, tunnels, pipelines, or even rectangular tanks, which tend to float up after liquefaction. And we've seen that in Japan, in UCD, and where the pipeline has tried to float up, you can see the long crest there and even manhole covers coming up. So we looked at this in great detail. There are some papers which you might, I'm not going to go into details of all these things, but what I want to impress upon you is there are many classes of problems which can be studied. And in this next 5 days, we're going to focus on one, pipe conditions. Okay? Right. I'm going to stop there. When should I stop?
1 o'clock.
One. Okay. Oh, maybe we have time. So we're coming close to lunch, so I expect you to be a bit tired. So just pay no attention to the maths. For all the things I have talked so far, there is underlying where you have two that is coupled together, and you can solve fluid phases. So for the solid phase, you write this equation, horrible little looking thing, and but basically it's Newton's law. Mass times acceleration gives you force, which is m times u dot. Damping stiffness with displacement gives you forces on solid beds for the fluid, except we have this Q which couples the solid and fluid together. So the maths, hopefully, it is solving those two equations properly. We have our own code called Swan Line, which a guy in Swansea has written some time ago. Is analyses in time domain, which is slow and which structural engineers, by the way, in frequency domain. Therefore, their solutions can finish in about 10 seconds. Whereas to make one of these runs takes about a decent problem. It will take 12 hours on that machine, which is quite fast. Or maybe 4 or 5 hours if you parallelize the code and run it on a supercomputer. These are quite big problems. But we can brute force it. And there are a few things you need to know. And this is one thing when you think that, I'm going to spend some money, buy Plaxis, they have earthquake option, I'll run the analysis, and therefore I know the answer. Nothing can be further from truth. This is what the important things you need to know when you are running numerical analysis. One is, do you know and understand the constitutive model you're using? It's not ticking a box and picking some numbers. If you're in that business, good luck to you. So you know what the constitutive model and how is it set up? How does it work? Second thing is that is inherently you're trying to ask the computer to solve a problem quite close to zero stresses. Now, even if you are half literate in computer problems or numerical problems, you will find that the solutions won't be stable as you approach liquefaction, because you're trying to force the problem to go into a space where there is no equilibrium to be formed. It's liquid, therefore it wants to move, right? So you need to be aware of your 5% action or maybe 3% aware from liquefaction, but not liquefaction. Clear? You need to know, if you understand the constant model, what model parameters I'm going to put into this thing. Okay? I get about 10 papers every month from mostly Iranian authors for various journals, and you review these things, and I reject about 90% of them. Axis flat. I'm not passionate about either. Pick these and run the analysis and say, look, you read other people's research papers and pick the numbers, run the analysis, and tell yours, does that look right? And based on his experience, he'll say, yeah, that looks right, that doesn't look right. And then you go, you have no basis to choose those numbers. Don't that is research by any stretch of imagination. Do a triaction test, do a pretty shear box test, I don't care. But have some material play basis for it. At least the main important parameters. There'll always be 2 or 3 fiddle factors in all of them, which like hardening parameter, which nobody knows what it is. The third important thing I want to stress is boundaries. For all these problems, your numerical mesh will always have boundaries. To be fair, with Flaxis and Flag, these days they have implemented a lot of solutions for boundaries. But again, you must pay attention to that as well. But once you've conquered all that, you get half-decent results. For example, this is the case of the key walls from Kobe and Trichy. Both did effectively their gravity key walls. After the earthquake, they simply moved horizontally by about 0.5 meter to meter. And you can see that's my deformed mesh, which my friend and I published in ACE. He did the centrifuge test, I ran the numerical analysis, and the comparison is quite good. And the reason the comparison is so good is I know the answer before I started the analysis. I'll be honest with you. You know, the difficulty is if you don't know the answer from a centrifuge test, what are you going to get? You can get whatever you want. In fact, the first time I ran this analysis, my key wall did not rotate this way, it rotated the other way. When I looked at it, I said that is not what my experiment is doing. Why is my analysis doing the wrong thing? And then I discovered what's most important in these analyses is these elements here. The interface elements behind the wall are the key. If you got that detail wrong, what happens is as the soil liquefies, it wants to settle, it will drag on the key wall and make the wall rotate the other way. Whereas in reality, the sand simply slips past it and the wall will rotate outwards. So if you know the mechanics, you can get the answer. And now I can be with confidence. If I change the geometry of this problem, I can run it with confidence. That is something you can do, but do get mechanics. Do write the papers about the mechanics, not about the analysis. Of course, we can compare accelerations at different locations for water pressures, displacements. They all seem to match reasonably well. They'll never match perfectly, of course. We know that, but they're not bad. Once you got a percent, again, the flotation of this could be matched with the numerical analysis quite well. Again, these are the ACE journal. But what's interesting is that you can get this, how the tunnel moves as it floats up. It does not float up like that. It does that. And that's what is so nice. And it will obviously have some bias and more towards one side. But it's important to get a lot of horizontal movements before I end up on the ground. And that's the cyclic nature of it. This is another piece of work we did, purely numerical. This is the one, some at home, which finished undergraduate and PhD degrees. He had 3 months doing nothing. And I said, he's not sitting ideally, run this analysis, and he ran it. So he got this paper in the IEJ, he got the prize for it. But all we did was this. You took this rectangular tunnel, and we know from our centrifuge test it should flow down. So we ran the analysis, and what's interesting is to see if all this turned into liquid, this box should simply come to the surface, right? What is stopping it from doing that? What is stopping it from doing the tunnel? And that is the key. And you can investigate that numerically, because we know that's happening in reality. And you can see the pore pressure builds up, and as the tunnel wants to move upwards, you can see the pore pressure drops off. So the mechanics adds together. And maybe I can play this as well. Yeah. Yeah. It's bad. And blue is good. So blue below the tunnel seems to is enough to stop the tunnel from moving up. By the way, this is exactly the same cross section of the BART tunnel, which joins San Francisco to Berkeley, and it goes through a liquefiable soil layer. So although we've done it for fun, we are having a dig at the American thing. The reason why it does not float is not because you understand soil mechanics, but because you're learning vacuum. And instead of finite elements, you can actually do much better analysis using this material point method. And he gave me this, and if the animation plays, I can show you. So a slope spreading out, and this is not done using. In fact, you can't solve this problem with finite elements because you get too much deformation. Then the finite elements give up on you. These techniques and the MPM methods will allow you to capture large strain. Okay, the last one before I stop is this one. They have a what they call the sandbag trough, and they're worried about if you got spillage, like you get here in red, how much, and you can work out the zone over which it will spread. Okay, I think upon centrifuge modeling. What I want to do, I know in your paperwork it says we will do a bit of static pile design, but before I start with kinematic, do a bit more to the centrifuge modeling side of things. So we'll get that out of the way, and then it will make sense when I come talking about the what you expect from pile foundations and how we are checking whether the piles are doing the thing you expected them to do or not. Centrifuge testing. So if you don't understand centrifuge testing, it will become a bit of a black box, and I don't want that to happen. So we'll spend a little bit of time this afternoon covering the basics of centrifuge modeling. It'll make my life and your life much better from tomorrow onwards. Okay? See you later.